I mean, what do we ever get out of the United Nations? You ever hear that the United Nations solved a problem? It's become a political hornet's nest. We spend a fortune on it, disproportionate, always disproportionate.
The United Nations is not a friend of democracy. It's not a friend to freedom. It's not a friend even to the United States of America, where, as you know, it has its home. Where do you ever see the United Nations? I love the United Nations in New York. They're wonderful. Do they ever settle anything? It's just like a political gang.
I have long felt the United Nations is an underperformer.
Which brings me to my next point, the utter weakness and incompetence of the United Nations.
Welcome back. Greeted, no doubt, with open arms, President Donald Trump attending his first annual meeting of the organization he has ridiculed so many times and so broadly in the past. On his first day at the UN General Assembly meeting today, Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and French President Macron. He'll deliver his main address tomorrow, but Trump today echoed his prior sentiments in a tone that was noticeably less disdainful.
In recent years, the United Nations has not reached its full potential because of bureaucracy and mismanagement. We seek a United Nations that regains the trust of the people around the world. In order to achieve this, the United Nations must hold every level of management accountable, protect whistleblowers, and focus on results rather than on process. To honor the people of our nations, we must ensure that no one and no member state shoulders a disproportionate share of the burden.
President Trump has apparently been preparing for his UN debut. One report by the Associated Press goes into detail about a crash course in national security he received at the urging of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Defense Secretary James Mattis. Quote, the officials said the purpose was to answer one of Trump's most persistent questions of his national security aides. Why does the U.S. government need so many people abroad? To be successful, Mattis and Tillerson decided they should use talking points and commentary with which they believed Trump would be most familiar. The role that the military, intelligence officers and diplomats play in making the world safe for American businesses like the Trump Organization to operate and expand abroad. With us tonight, the co-author of that article, Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter for the Associated Press. Michael Crowley is here with us as well, Politico senior foreign affairs correspondent and national security editor. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Jonathan, was this just short of using emojis, this briefing?
So this was in July, and the stated purpose of this meeting was to discuss strategy in Iraq and Afghanistan. The president and some members of his senior entourage went to the Pentagon in a windowless room nicknamed the Tank. And there, Secretary Mattis, Secretary Tillerson, a few other key aides went through a 90-minute proposal that was described to us, the Associated Press, educating the president is sort of in America's role in the world, going through why it was important to project American influence and power globally, to suggest, like, this is why we have embassies here, this is why we have this military base here. The president, of course, let's remember, ran on a campaign of America first. He suggested many times that he wanted to reduce the American footprint across the world, suggesting that it was a waste of American resources, American money, perhaps American lives. And those in the Pentagon suggested there are significant strategic reasons why we have to have all of this, why we have to have so many people. And the president came out of that meeting, he said publicly, it was a very good meeting, that it was very illuminating. And we have seen, since then, we have seen some of the nationalist forces in his White House, like Steve Bannon, be ejected. We have seen him commit to an Afghanistan strategy that includes a gradual but some troop increase. And we have seen him not, at least not yet, pull back from the world. So I think there are people around the other world leaders, people around the globe who've been very nervously watching what this president would do internationally, how he would treat the UN. They now have at least some degree of reassurance that he will stay the course. But of course, we'll find out more tomorrow.
So, Michael, what's his greeting going to be like tomorrow? Let's talk tone and tenor and adherence to teleprompter.
Well, Brian, you can never know for sure.
That is true.
You know, I mean, Donald Trump can be handed a speech and you don't know if he's going to read the script. And I keep thinking back to the appearance he made at NATO headquarters in Brussels, I think, in May. And it was very important to a number of his key advisors, including the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, and Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, that Trump reaffirm his commitment to Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, which says that an attack on one member will be treated as an attack on any other member. NATO allies were very upset about the fact that he had seemed to question this as a candidate. And when handed a speech with this language, and by the way, aides had previewed, they had sort of celebrated the day before in a leak to the New York Times and maybe other outlets, he's going to say this about Article 5, everybody get excited. And Trump got to that part of the speech and he just didn't read
He talked
it.
about the construction cost of the new headquarters.
He complained about the cost of the new headquarters. So you never know. That said, the smoke signals coming from the White House tonight suggest we will get a relatively conventional speech. It's not going to be, so we are getting the sense, a tirade. It's not going to be a blistering denunciation of the UN like we saw in those wonderful flashbacks to the campaign that were so colorful. He's going to talk about the threat from North Korea, which would be very expected. He is going to talk about Iran, which is very much on the radar as there's a key deadline coming up on the Iran nuclear deal. He will, I think, criticize the UN, talk about the need for reform. But at this point, we're not expecting a stem winder. Again, you never know.